Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hibba Youssef.
That was the number one reason for failure. It wasn't the inability to raise money, for example. By far, it was founder dynamics. And so just getting that right is really key.
Isn't hiring hard enough without guessing who's actually going to work out? The Predictive Index uses behavioral data to help you hire the right people and keep them thriving before things go sideways. Stop winging it and visit try.predictiveindex.com and figure out what actually drives your people.
Hey, we are back. Your favorite podcast in your ears. I'm Hibba, your host and resident hater. Every week I yap about something work related, and each season has a theme. And this season we're hearing from guests who want to talk about their first time. First mistakes, first breakthroughs, first time doing something that scared them, because honestly, that's where the good stuff's at. And joining me today to talk about the first time he founded a company is the co-founder and CEO of Candor IQ, which helps companies ensure fairness and equity in workforce planning. Harris built Candor IQ as a first-generation immigrant who struggled to understand his market value while navigating green cards and citizenship. Candor IQ unifies headcount, compensation, and equity planning into a single system of record, enabling HR and finance leaders to collaborate more effectively. The platform uses AI-powered workflows to surface insights, flag risks, and accelerate processes like scenario planning and compensation analysis. Harris focuses on helping organizations create more agile, accountable, and transparent approaches to workforce planning. Harris, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. You are my favorite hater. I know we met in person a month ago, was it?
Yeah.
We resonated so strongly, and so I'm so excited that you brought me on. I'm excited for this conversation.
We had like a million invisible strings, and then of course, in typical behavior, I took like a minute to email you, but it was like on my ever-growing to-do list. And I was like, I will not forget about this. We will have a podcast together, because I had such a fun time talking to you. I came to a Candor IQ dinner, and I got to meet some pretty cool people and talk about the challenges we're facing in HR. And it's kind of wild how many of us are still dealing with really big compensation issues to date.
Totally. I know. Hopefully we'll unpack some of that today.
Okay, before we get to the good stuff in the episode, every season I pick like a fun teaser question to ask everybody when the episode starts. And this season, the teaser question is, what's something you believed about work in your early career that you've completely unlearned?
So many things, but
right? Same.
I will say that I was a workhorse where it was like clocking in the hours, would result to like Y outcome. And yes, like obviously the time you put in does matter, but like I'm far more strategic and thoughtful about it, partially because maybe I have kids, so I don't have the time, but it's been a good forcing function as I've grown my career, become an executive, and now a founder.
Yeah, that's such a good one. I have so many things I've unlearned. I could probably do a whole episode on what I was like in my 20s in my career and what I'm like now, because it's very different. But I can't wait to talk about you and how you started your company, because I'm trying to remember every podcast episode I've ever done, which feels like an impossible feat. But I don't think I've actually ever talked to a founder about the whole story of how they started a company. And your story is incredibly fascinating, because you had like a pretty great career, great title. You worked at some really impressive places. And then you decided, I think I need to start a company. Like, talk to me about how you decided to do that. Was the first moment that you were like, I can, toss aside these like great companies I've worked for and I want to do my own thing?
Some people have midlife crisis and buy a sports car or buy a house in the Hamptons. I decided I wanted to quit and start a company. That was my midlife crisis. But to go back, I'm like, we're talking about 4 generations of immigrants, actually, like from my great grandfather. So I had an amazing career. I was chief product and technology officer at companies like Checker, at Blend. I was at Salesforce, Dropbox, and I learned a lot each of those roles, but there was a professional reason and personal reason why I wanted to start the company. Maybe on the personal side first, having immigrated to the U.S. 20 years ago, I have a passport, green card, everything is good and kosher. Just have to put that disclaimer out there in today's world. But I saw pay discrepancy in my first job in Dubai. Then I saw inability to negotiate pay effectively in my first job here until I had my green card. And I just have a personal chip on the shoulder that regardless of race, orientation, gender, any of those things, like pay should be fair and transparent, and meritocracy is important. I know it should be aligned to business goals as well. So that was the personal side of it. The professional side was I managed 100 plus people in engineering and product in many of these companies. And engineers are the hardest people to satisfy. You can't say you have to give them real detail and explain, right? It's even harder than most other functions when it comes to explaining comp. And to be honest, I probably drove my HR and finance teams crazy because every time I had to make an offer or an employee's asking for more money or a title or a promotion, I could not give them a one-line answer. Like they expected from me, like, here's like business KPIs. Here's the, like, obviously I didn't share budget with everyone, but here's like some of the rules and parameters from the business standpoint. Here's where you fit in this picture. Here's where you fit in with your peers. And so I had to stitch all of these things together because they were in like different systems and spreadsheets and Slack conversations. I had to do that multiple times. And when you get it wrong, it really hurts. It hurts the business, but it hurts the people even more, right? So I always felt as an operator leader that it was upon me to look around the corners. And of course, I know the people team thinks the same way as well. Like you want that line of sight to be able to be proactive and not reactive and have to deal with this as fire drills. So that's kind of like why I decided I want to start this company.
I think those are two really great reasons. You had a personal and a professional, which sometimes I meet founders and they're like, oh, I just saw this problem and I wanted to solve it. And I was like, okay, that's like nice. But like, have you experienced this problem? I'm always baffled by the amount of people who start companies in an area they have like no experience in. And then they become, it's like HR tech. I don't know. I have a whole gripe about this, but that's not for this episode. But when honestly, I have a midlife crisis someday and start a company. What did you, I know, right? You're gonna be the first person I call like help. I think it's happening. What did you think founding a company would feel like versus what it actually felt like?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I came in knowing it was going to be hard and difficult for sure, and that it would be satisfying. And it was both of those feelings, I can feel it at the extreme. So like the great days are amazing. You feel like the sugar high of like closing a big customer or helping solve a problem and making a difference in someone's life. Or like, people leader says like, I was able to retain 2 people because of, one of them told me this last week where because that tool, the AI was able to help them kind of identify some issues. And when they had a one-on-one conversation, there were those people who are actually actively starting to look, even though they like their role and their jobs. Like, that's amazing. Like, that feels so good. Like, feels better than I ever thought it would because we are, the mission of it is really impactful. But then the hard side too, some days you are like, oh, we didn't get this customer, or we made a mistake here, or something else happened, or we didn't get the candidate we wanted. And that feels, this emotional roller coaster is far bigger of a high and low swings than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, I feel like the reason everyone's always like, wouldn't you start a company? And I'm like, I don't know. That feels like kind of scary. Like the acquiring customer side of it, I think freaks me out. And so like, I would be like, try to be like a vibes-based founder. I'd be like, everybody, like, let's have a good time. And then it would like, things would get serious. And I'd be like, we're not having a good time, everybody. It's not a good time.
But I think like one tangential thing is, I think that's a great way to sell, especially in 2026, especially selling to HR, yeah. I've been a product leader seeing us sell to finance people, sales people, marketing people. It's different. When you're selling to HR, it is about the vibe. Like, do I like this vendor? Do I like the people? Do I like the mission? Do I want to partner with them? And so that becomes a superpower. So I think whatever you decide to do there.
You heard it here first. I will have a midlife crisis soon, and I will be starting a company.
Harris will be the first one. Get the stuff done for you and problem solve. And so have the right, that was the other part calculus when I decided to start this company. It was the timing was the right co-founder, someone who I knew for 15 years professionally and personally. And we had like full trust in each other and also an appreciation of each other's differences and experiences. And I think that was really key. I wouldn't have started if it wasn't for the right teammate partner.
Yeah. Co-founder duos are fascinating to me, or like trios, because it's always like, what's the dynamic? Does it work? Does it not work? Like, and sometimes you start something with someone where like maybe it doesn't end up working in the end, and it's like just a clash of personalities. So, I mean, I think it was a really smart time to do it with somebody you knew and trusted. What is the first thing that hit different? Because like you were an executive at some like really big companies and you're in Silicon Valley. So you got to understand what it was like to be an executive at some of these huge companies. But what was the first thing that hit different between being a founder versus being
Yeah.
an executive? Because those are like
Oh,
two
yeah.
different hats.
Yeah, I think one, it was I had to do everything myself initially, right? Like now we have a team of 20 people. I still have to do a lot of things myself, but then it was just the two of us, and like the buck stops with you. There's no one where you're like, you can pass it, like, hey, can you figure this out? No, you had to figure all of those things out. I think that was really, really different. I just had to be even more open-minded about learning and relearning. And I think the second part of it was really thinking from first principles. So like when you're starting a company, you're not, maybe you are, but like you're not often trying to like just build a better mousetrap. You're trying to think about it fundamentally, like what didn't work in the market that you were trying to solve uniquely and how's it different. So both from a product perspective or a sales perspective or a support perspective. And so, yes, you can learn from a lot of your past experiences, but some of those become bad habits. Like, as an executive, I'm like, I'm doing all of these things in a structured manner, and you kind of have to figure out what do you throw out the window and what do you keep. And so there's a lot of relearning and rewiring myself as a person and individual. And the third one is rewiring the psychology too, because I came from a product engineering background and it's very logic driven. Failure, there's usually not failure in engineering a product, right? Like you do it or you do it well, or you can be iterative, but like when you're doing all these different things and fundraising and doing customer support and doing sales, like you will lose as well, and you'll like get beat up a bunch. And so I think you just have to like build that I think thick skin and mindset around those things and embrace it too.
Yeah, that resilience is key. People always ask me like, how do you know if you have a resilient workforce? And I'm like, observe them after something fails.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
if they try to get up and keep going and figure out how to do it better, like, yeah, that's someone who's very resilient. It's interesting because I get asked a lot. People are like, you seem like a very resilient person. Like, how did you end up this way? And I have to tell people like resiliency is built from like you experiencing really hard and
Totally.
really bad things. You don't just like wake up one day and you're like, I'm resilient. It's like, no, you had to overcome something. So I definitely think that like being resilient as a founder is incredibly important because like you're not always going to be successful. And also you're going to carry responsibility that nobody understands in a way that like very different.
And Heba, like here's a silly thing that we did. We were trying to be proactive, so we wrote like what our cultural values should be when we like the first week we started the company. But actually, 3 months in, we were like, no, we need to rewrite this because we've also learned like what are the right what are our actual values? What do we need for the people to be successful and the company to be successful? So we had to rewrite our cultural values like 3 to 6 months in, to be honest, after we did the job for a while. So like, as an example of good learning, but it was absolutely important in hiring the right people because we generally don't hire from Salesforce, even though we have a massive network, because they don't maybe fit the mold of what you need to be able to do and how you need to think. So yeah, like there was a lot of like a feedback loop there that helped us just get better.
So interesting. So I've worked with 2 sets of first time founders, 2 sets of like second or like multiple time founders. What do you think is the hardest part about being a first time founder that maybe nobody warned you about?
I mean, just getting started is probably very hard. Most founders get stuck at founding. They don't start, right? Like
Step one,
step one is
start.
just doing it, pulling the band-aid. That's where majority of the people fail. I think then the second biggest bucket becomes finding the right partner. That's when we went through Y Combinator 2.5 years ago. That was the number one reason for failure. It wasn't the inability to raise money, for example. Actually, by far it was founder dynamics, and so just getting that right is really key. I think if you solve those first two, you're probably the top quartile of companies already. Then the other things click in. You have the right product, the right mission, the right solution, the right teammates. But that's much, much smaller. Like that's where most people fail.
Oh, I really like that lesson. I never thought about it that way. I thought people were really good at picking their partners. And now as I'm thinking through it, people really aren't, right? Because like sometimes you have to be self-aware enough to go find somebody who can complement your flaws, for lack of a better, or like your weakness. Like you want, I assume, in your founding partner to be somebody who balances it and complements it.
100%. We talk about like the diversity of in your company, but imagine like diversity is even more important with like your co-founder, because that's like half your company. And so you have to think about it like their background, their experiences, their worldviews. It's even more important. And then it's super important for the first 5 people you hire, because that really kind of casts what your company is. Talking about culture as well. You can write it, but then you have to hire for it and you have to enforce it. And if you get the wrong mix of people, then they hire people like that reinforce that, like those patterns. And so it's super, super important for sure.
It's so interesting because something other than hiring, which I've seen a lot of first-time founders butcher and mess up or not think about well, the other biggest mistake I see founders make is mistakes with compensation. Like I have gotten in before and I've had to fix the early mistakes. What do you think is the first mistake founders make with comp that can cost them a lot later on?
Yeah, that's a good one. So like one, I mean, at least at early stage, right? If you're thinking first mistakes that founders make is they're not thinking about all the levers correctly, right? So it's easy to say just cash, but if you're doing this as a founder recruiting for the first time, one, you probably can't pay like market or above market anyway. You want to think about other things like the long-term incentives, like equity. You want to maybe have like bonuses and like success based. So if the company hits X, like X goals, then tied to that. Really try like looking at all the levers of comp, and sometimes benefits as well, like total reward, because people are motivated not just by money, but like maybe the flexibility and stuff like that. Like we hire a lot of remote because we give people the flexibility instead of it just being in, even though I live in the Silicon Valley Bay Area, I don't want to hire everyone here. Actually, I want to hire people across the US and hopefully across the globe as well. And so like thinking about that and then tying it to business KPIs, founders get that wrong in the beginning, but also even at Series B, C, D, like growth stage as well. It's employees don't understand what the KPIs are, how they're getting paid, what the incentives are. And if you're hiring smart, motivated people, they want that transparency. They want to know if the company's doing well or the company's not doing well and how they can help. And so people get that wrong at every stage.
Yeah, I have had to unwind some really thorny compensation situations when I come in later because not a lot of people start a company with an HR person or with somebody who understands compensation as well as you and I do. And so you end up being hired like employee 50, employee 70, and suddenly you're looking at a mess of issues that are just somewhat impossible to fix or will cause a lot of pain to fix immediately. So I think those are some really good points. It's always interesting watching the cash and equity trade-off too of like early employees. Like if you give them the option to go with more equity over more cash, like solving that later on is like such a compounding problem that it feels impossible at times to actually fix.
And how about to your point around like just maybe a founder brings in an HR leader or at least like a mid-level HR person, past 50 employees, maybe between 50 to 100. But then the die has already been cast. You've hired all of these people. There's no structure. It's all over the place. There's no range. So now that you're hiring more people, you're getting that wrong. But also now these employees that you've hired, maybe they're a year or two in, and then now they're asking about like, what does my career growth look like? What does my progress look like? Why am I getting paid X when my peer is getting paid Y? And then the founder's not able to explain that thing, and it's a big reset. It's always painful because now you have to like rebuild the structure and justify it, and ultimately you end up certainly losing some people because it was, like the company missed the mark on some of those things, and it's really painful. So that's foundational to hiring, retention, career. So having like the job ladder in there early is like, yeah, it's one of the core inputs, and founders don't do that early, don't think through it early enough, and don't flesh it out. Yeah.
But it's okay because AI will just take over HR's job, right? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. If you listen to this podcast several seasons in a row, I make that joke. I think it'd be impossible to take over our jobs, but I'm intrigued to see how it can help us do our jobs. I could geek out with you about comp forever. In fact, we kind of did at dinner. What made you want to go deep on this problem, like comp specifically? I know you said personal and professional at the start of the episode, but like what keeps you going solving this problem?
Yeah, I mean, people's pay is 80% of operating expense at every company is humans, right? And we have like cloud costs and software costs. And there's whole categories of companies that like are optimizing your 5% of your budget, like for cloud spend, software spend, something else, procurement. But for the 80%, you only have like payroll systems and you have FP&A systems. There's no strategic way to manage it. So like, and every company hires people. It's in every industry. There's a lot of complexity with like hourly workers and contract workers. It's not just, like the complexity of the workforce has really multiplied. Like people are hiring globally. So it's the biggest problem in the world, and it's getting more complicated. And the at least the tools and systems now are not built to meet that, right? They're just more systems of execution or transaction, systems of record, not the systems to make decisions. There's no way for HR and finance to collaborate together. This is a multi-player decision every single time, and you see these silos. And so, like, to me, it was clear this is the biggest market in the world. Like, it's people. Like, but what's bigger than labor costs? And no one's thinking about this in a strategic way. And so there's so much we can do. Like we started with compensation management because it's a core input to everything. But then now we do headcount planning. We want to do sales commission management. We want to help you manage like even your agent spends and do capacity planning. So how many recruiters you need, how many CSMs you need. And each of those has historically been separate industries, categories with different companies. But that's not how businesses make those decisions. So I think it's an unsolved problem. There's a lot of point solutions out there. And so that's what gets me excited. This is like a big, hard problem. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said, because like the two things I hear the most from HR leaders, and I talk to like so many in my community also as well, like 10,000 HR leaders, and they're talking to each other all day long. The two things that come up, I feel like most frequently, are comp and my balloons. I forget that it does that. Yeah, I know. I don't know why. It's the two things that come up, I'll do my balloons off screen, are compensation and performance. They're the two topics that come up on the daily. Somebody's asking, how would you comp this role? What would you do differently? I have an employee asking this thorny and very specific thing about compensation. Like, is this fair? I'm going to market. What's the right rate? So, you went deep on a problem that is felt by HR very rarely to this day. Like, I love compensation stuff. So like when I got to work week, the first project I did week 1 was I looked at all of our compensation data and then benchmarked and leveled every single role. And I built my bands for them. And my CEO was like, why did you choose to like do this first? And I was like, this is the root cause of most problems at work. If it's not compensation, it's like the manager. If it's not the manager, it's performance. But usually performance takes you back to compensation and the manager. So it's like a never ending circle. And so,
absolutely.
All of us want to know what makes people work at work. Like, how will they handle feedback or make decisions or work with the team without causing chaos? The Predictive Index uses behavioral assessments to show you how people actually think and work, so you're not guessing and hoping for the best. Maybe Mike needs structure to thrive, or Margot desires more collaboration. When you understand your people, work actually works. Take the behavioral assessment today at try.predictiveindex.com and finally get some real answers.
I love that you went deep on this problem, because I think it's so unsolvable right now that like with the right tech, I hope that like HR people get even smarter about how to make compensation decisions, because those are big business decisions too.
Yeah. And like, you were talking about AI taking HR jobs. I actually think AI will help make it possible for HR to be able to effectively solve this problem. It's still a very human problem. You need the context, you need the thinking, like, that doesn't go away. You need the relationship with the people. You need to be able to communicate and explain things. What you don't want to do as an HR person is stitch all these different spreadsheets together and then clean up the data and like then put it together and structure it like that. That's all the stuff that you hope that a software or AI can help you do, so that you can actually be strategic, you can actually own the relationship, you can actually drive alignment across the organization.
And comp conversations are like the highest risk conversations, in my opinion, the ones that we should be preparing for the most, because I wrote a newsletter on this last year. The psychology of money is like so much more than what you're paying someone. It's like how they value themselves, how you value them, what it means for their livelihood. Can they exist to live in a certain way? So there's so much to unwind with compensation that isn't even like a work thing, that people cannot mess up those conversations. But it's so interesting because you came from product when you decided to solve this. Like you don't have an HR background, which honestly I think is better for a lot of reasons, but you came from product and you were experiencing this in real time. But how does that background actually shape what you build? And maybe where did it lead you astray?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll go with the easy part first, which is like how did it help me make right decisions? So I saw the outcome of it, because I think one of the other gaps with HR in general has historically been that like a lot of HR people like thought about like the buck stops at looking at things from an HR perspective. No, but your CHRO is a company leader, right? Like an HR leader cares about business KPIs, business success, and yes, through the people lens. And so like I saw that myself as an operator at these companies, because ultimately I was making human decisions, but it was with the business lens. So connecting that dot was missing. So I saw that multiple times. I made the same mistakes, or I struggled to get it right. My people teams as well, my finance teams as well. So connecting to business KPIs, business value was super important. So like, part of Candor IQ is we want to build so that HR can actually be strategic and actually, like it's less about spreadsheets and more about strategy and more about human. So like we built the product from that lens. A lot of the historical tools in this space were just built to be like, here's your benchmarking data, go figure out, or here's your salary ranges, right? They didn't connect it to the business problem. And like that was a big learning for me as a product leader operator. And then I had a lot of experiences in how you actually bring the data together, because I worked at these companies where we partner with like the applicant tracking system and the payroll system and the equity solution and the performance management, and like really being able to solve it technically is something like I was able to do. But I went in the mindset of like, I don't know all the answers. I have not done a comp review cycle 3 years ago, and I have done like hundreds of these or helped customers with hundreds of those.
Yeah.
So I came in with the humility to like learn and like figure it out with our customers. And I was lucky that some of them took a chance at us when we were younger. And now we have like 100+ customers and public companies as well. But I didn't go in saying like, hey, I know the answer, I'm a smart engineer, or any of those things. I think that like humility is super important. And I surrounded myself with people who were like willing to share and coach me and help me like fill in my gaps. And I learned and got better over time. I'm still learning, but yeah, I think that was really important.
You said that at the very beginning, like a callback to like, you have to unlearn and learn things to be a good founder. And I love that you also are adopting that, because so many people will say like, my assumption is my assumption and I know I'm right. And I feel like you were like, no, like I know how I've experienced it, but how I've experienced it could be very different from how somebody in a different industry has experienced it. That's what makes comp like so interesting to me and complicated, because people will come to me for like compensation advice. And I'm always like, what industry are you in? What's your company size? Like, what have you done
100%.
historically? Like there's 1,000 context points. Before I could give you my advice. So I love that you like stepped outside of what you experienced, like learn from others, because that probably helped you so much, and you learned, like you said, so much.
100%. And I think that what you just mentioned kind of answers maybe the second part of your question, was like, what did we not get right, or what are we like getting right? Is just like the aha was the permutations, the complexity of what people want to do was even greater than I had originally anticipated. And people don't want to compromise on how to do comp and performance, right? Like you're not gonna say it's not like Slack or Dropbox where like this is how a folder works and this is how a channel works. You must use it, right? Like no, companies are like, this is how we want to do it. So like that was a big aha, but also like a big opportunity. Like we've built the platform to be really, really, really flexible, kind of like Salesforce in some ways. But then the thing that we're working on continuously is how do you also make it easy at the same time? Because like we have 50-person company customers and we have 5,000-person company customers.
Yeah.
We want there to be a way for you to like scale your complexity as you grow. But I think that's part of the opportunity is like a lot of people get it wrong. And so that's an area of constant investment and rethinking.
Yeah, I'm sure we're both going to be at Transform in a few weeks. I'm sure there's probably a session on compensation. I should probably go look at the agenda, but also I guarantee you at least one point during the conference, I'll be chatting with an HR leader and this will come up. Someone will be like, oh, I'm just in the thick of it. This employee wants that. This person wants that. CEO wants me to redo this. It's such an interesting and complex problem. It's probably why I also love compensation so much as like an area of HR, because it is complex and meaty and requires you to like, it's like a science and an art. You have to be and it's like a collaborative exercise. The most interesting trope, I think, at any company is that HR and finance won't get along, right? That they're never aligned. I actually like had this conversation with my CEO the other day because we were talking about a decision we made. And he was like, well, that was like more for finance, not for HR, but I wish you had done this and done that. And I was like, okay, we're watching like a common trope play out, right? Like HR versus finance. I was like, I do not want to engage in this. I was like, and I also don't want to put you, our CEO, in the middle of this because that's like unfair to everyone involved. So HR and finance still can't seem to get aligned. What do you think is actually in the way?
There's a few things. One is we're looking at the same things from different lenses, right? Like when you're thinking about workforce or you're looking at individual employee comp, you want to look at it from a budget perspective, a number of headcount perspective, a cost perspective, a skills perspective, a leveling perspective, fairness perspective, all of there's, I don't know, like 6 to 8, 10 different things. And I guess like everyone's has different motivations, lens, or incentives around it. Like finance might look at, like, I'm oversimplifying, of course, dollars and headcount numbers. But the job of the CFO is to be a business leader, just in the same way the job of the CHRO is to be a business leader. So like I think one is mindset. Like there's been separate historical trainings and like how different departments were set and the lines were very kind of created hard and fast. But that's not that CEOs don't expect that, don't want that. The board don't want that anymore, right? Like in 70s, sure, HR was a tactical function and finance was a tactical function. It was accounting. Both of these roles have become to like have evolved to be strategic, really, really strategic. And so I think, you know, that's one. Then like the data is in different places, like a finance and accounting tool is all there, but they don't have org chart information. They don't have skills information. They don't have span of control information, and the HR tools don't have the reverse amount of information. So I don't think the tools are helping. So that's why everything has to happen in spreadsheets. There's a lot of bad like data as well. How do you connect like payroll information with like financial models and things like that? You kind of wanted to bring it together. And so that everyone, like both the finance organization and the people organization, are looking at the same thing, like level playing field. And then people will often come to the same conclusions. It's not that the finance person doesn't care about people and just cares about numbers, but they don't have any visibility into it in the same way that HR doesn't have maybe visibility into all the cost implications as well. So empowering the people and cross-sharing that information will get you like much, much closer, I think, across these different functions.
It's so interesting when finance and HR work well together. It can be like actual magic. So I've been like really lucky. My current CFO and the last CFO I worked with, I had a really good relationship with them. And I went to them instantly and was like, listen, I'm not playing HR versus finance. We want the same thing in the end. If we have a common way of getting there and a common way of understanding one another, then that will do us better than us being at each other's throats. Because it is never fun when you are played against each other. And if you think about it, like our incentives are a little misaligned. So like my goal is to like keep the employees happy, grow the employees, right? All of that is associated with money potentially. And then you have the CFO who might have like an opposite initiative, which is like stop spending money. So like, how do you reconcile that maybe our incentives are actually opposite is such an interesting thing, because then you dig down into it and you're like, well, if the business is successful, then our incentives actually become more aligned, right?
Yeah, outcomes are aligned, but the incentives are not always perfectly aligned. And I think there's also like a time gap in terms of alignment, because here's a concrete example. The CFO is also responsible if you have very high turnover and then you have to hire and it's impacting the business, not just the HR team. But sometimes it takes 9 to 12 months to see that, right? Because you hired someone, they're unhappy, they left, then you had to hire someone else again. And so but they're putting a financial plan now for the next 12 months. So they're not thinking about it. So there's the time gap of it too. And I think that's probably an opportunity where like the people team can help the finance organization see like, hey, what's happening historically? what might happen if we don't think about this, and like be a bit more forward looking and proactive.
I love that. I was just thinking, like, yes, you're right. My CFO does build the plan for like a year. And then I tell her when to adjust dates, and then she adjusts the dates. And then she's like, it is a very interesting relationship, I think, with HR and finance. And especially when you bring up compensation, it's like everyone has their own way of wanting to do things. So it's very cool. You mentioned headcount planning, because headcount planning is something, I think I wrote this in a newsletter. Maybe I posted on LinkedIn. I said it's the thing that I don't think anyone knows how to do. Why does no one seem to understand how to do headcount planning or do it well? And I'm laughing because like even I struggle with headcount planning, right? Like we go in, it's for us at this point, it's like a daily process because we are like an early stage startup. So like every single day, I'm like, here are the roles that are open. What do we want to do with them? Do we want to hire this one? Do we not want to hire that one? But it is a common, like just feeling every single HR person I know deals with. Where does comp and headcount, where do you think it'll be in 5 years? Because right now I think it's like everywhere. Like,
It's
do you think
everywhere.
we'll be done
Yeah.
with spreadsheets in 5 years, or do you think we will still be dealing with the spreadsheets?
I mean, like, I really think that's the goal. I don't think of Candor IQ, depending on how much market dominance we have, TBD, how many people are using spreadsheets. But I think why this is a problem is a few things, like, again, other than the data being in different places, but the business is so dynamic, right? Like every month, business, or every week,
Yep.
maybe sometimes daily,
Every hour, every
sometimes
5 seconds.
KPIs are chilling. So like imagine you're using spreadsheets where you have to go in and update a cell by cell. Like it's ultimately you want this to be a continuous process, because really that's how businesses are operating, not a, here's a 1 year plan and then you don't refresh that like on a monthly basis. So like, or here's a comp structure and then you don't change it for a year or 2 years. Like that doesn't work. Like these things need to change at a much higher frequency, because that's what's demand in the business. And so you want like the tooling to be able to do that too. Like, can you update it on a week, at least on a weekly basis, like tweak some of the parameters, like if there's revenue targets or something else that's changed, because then you can immediately lock or unlock headcount. And if you're capturing that information on a daily, weekly basis, then you can also set rules and guidance. So you might say, hey, we didn't hit this KPI, so per our original plan, like philosophy or framework we designed, we're only going to unlock this headcount. Instead of now this being a conversation between Heba and every business unit leader and the finance leader, like, okay, we didn't do XYZ, so now we got to freeze this, or we got to lower this level, or we have to change from tier 1 locations to tier 2, right? So there's like trickle down effects. But you can automate a lot of this if you can actually capture the inputs in one single place and like manage it. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, capturing inputs. I was just, as you were talking, I was like, I don't know if I could ever do all of this, but I need to, because it is like a weekly conversation at times for us. And it's very hard, because then I have to be like, oh, what if we change this? What if we change that? When we were at dinner, you were telling me about how you were working with a CFO, and they had like learned that because they had hired these roles too early, they had unintendedly cost the business another $500,000.
Yep, that happened with one of our clients. The CFO put together a plan, but then in execution, hired too early, hired one level too high at the wrong location, and they overspent. Just the delta. It wasn't the salaries, just the delta on how much they got wrong was $500,000. So between plan and actuals and execution, and this company is pretty structured, right? So yeah, we've seen that time and time again with our customers. So like with Candor IQ, like since they brought us on, like now we're the operating system where finance and HR lives. They'll push all the data into the payroll at the end or the accounting tool, but they're managing. Here's the plan, and if the plan changes, the finance team will change it. It'll trickle down to every recruiter will get notified if one of their headcount, was changed or locked. Immediately, right? The business unit leader or manager who's hiring will find out as well. Or if you are doing a spot bonus and there's a change there to like what are we moving comp to more like instead of merit based to like promotion based, because we want to drive that behavior. Like it's trickling down, and because the tool's multiplayer, not just HR and finance, but the managers, the execs as well. It's trickling down, because ultimately, like I think that's the other problem is, who's responsible for communicating and educating and training and all of these things? That's a massive amount of work too. So that is where things like software can help if done right. So like change management is necessary though.
The trickle down is my least favorite part. because it's like, I think people sometimes forget when they're making like decisions that, everyone has to be informed of the decision. And there's like a lot of change management that goes. And like I said earlier, like compensation is like the, I think, most sensitive conversation you can have at the workplace outside of things like harassment and inappropriate things occurring. Like, I do think compensation is one of those ones that high risk, high reward. If you butcher it, you could lose the trust of somebody. And if you do it right, you could gain, leaps and bounds when it comes to like retention and keeping that employee happy. And so I think it's so interesting that, that trickle down gets done, because I just think about if I moved my headcount out 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like I would have to then go manually inform every single person, including like my recruiters to my hiring managers. And then my hiring managers have questions about why. And then I have to explain to them why. And then I have to tell this person, and their department lead needs to know. And it's like an ongoing game of telephone that I don't want to play ever again.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you change the level or the location or the requirements for the role, right? Like that's also even more complicated, because now you have to not just numerical information, but now you have to explain why you made the change and like how it ties back to business, because otherwise the recruiters may be frustrated because they were looking for a certain profile. The hiring manager might also be frustrated because something got changed in terms of expectations. So, yeah.
There was this funny tweet I read recently that I feel like you would appreciate, that somebody was like, 95% of work is just like regulating your emotions. Because I was just thinking like every single touch point of that process of like telling somebody we changed the level or we changed their comp or we changed this is like the emotional reaction was the first thing I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to manage that, versus the actual thing I have to do. It's like, no, it's their reaction. So if HR gets this right, like data, alignment, transparency, what do you think actually changes for the average employee?
Like, so let's see. Let's talk about what changes for the employee and the organization. So for employees, employees want very personalized compensation total rewards, right? Like especially Gen Z, they don't want like what you and I accept as okay is not okay. Like they want transparency. They're like, hey, we want to work remotely in Bali 2 weeks. We want these kind of benefits. Their relationship with work is very different, first of all, right? And so
in a good way,
people want it to be hyper personalized, sort of like Netflix, like the algorithm,
Yep.
My wife and I have very different recommendations from Netflix in terms of what our viewing preferences, but employees kind of want that. That's what they're demanding. And like the HR team's not been able to do that because of all the things we talked about. So I think it creates the opportunity to finally provide hyper personalized compensation, benefits, total rewards, provide hyper personalized career ladders and experiences. Some people want to, like rise quickly. They want to do XYZ kind of problems, and other people don't. And at least in lots of organizations, maybe not in the small startups necessarily, but you want to have the mix of people with different life goals and expectations. So it'll help you match that better with employees. So that's one thing that's going to change more. I think managers want more transparency. They want more tools. They want to be able to kind of like be good managers. Most managers are not terrible managers. Some are, but like I think part of it is they just don't have the tools. They're not equipped.
Definitely not
trained. It's missing, and the HR team can't do that. Like, can you like talk to managers on an ongoing basis and give them like hyper personalized coaching and guidance? You can't do that either. Like, you don't have the resources to do that, and so like a lot more will move from like the central tower to the spokes in here in this case, and like really make managers more effective. And then number 3, I think it frees up the HR time from spreadsheets. So you can do more strategy work with your finance team, work with your managers, be more personalized, have more human relationships with your organization. So yeah, those are all the things I think can change.
I love that. The manager piece is so real. I wrote about today, like how the manager level is basically getting like decimated, and how they'll potentially in the future, there'll be like a manager to like 10, 15, 20 people. And then just imagine like my biggest pet peeve, or like my gears, that something that really grinds my gears, is when managers are like, here's your pay decision. Don't ask me any questions, ask HR. I'm like, excuse me? Like did you not, that we are active partners in this decision, And somehow I'm the one explaining to the employee, not you. That makes no sense. So I do think like when you can get compensation right, when you can get the data in a place, when there's alignment across everyone from like executive to managers to employees, I just think everything gets better. Like I was saying, when I think of problems at work, it's usually either like a compensation problem or a manager problem. Usually is what it ends up being across the board. Sometimes it's like like an employee problem. Rarely, I actually think the other two play a bigger force than the employee problem. And so I think like why don't we solve those problems so that we can stop having to do like the little things all the time and get to focus on the really big things about how our head count plan, when we want to hire these people, how it's all happening, what the cost of the company is, all that good stuff that I don't think we get enough brain share, honestly, or time to think about.
Totally. Yeah. Can we spend more time on learning development, like creating hyper personal experiences, like not the tactical stuff for sure.
Okay, so one last question to wrap up our episode. And I didn't tell you this question ahead of time. So I've put you on the spot.
Let's do
What
it.
advice do you have for somebody who wants to start a company? They want to be a first-time founder. What advice do you have for them?
I think like we touched on some of it before, but if you are doing it solo, that's fine. At least in the world of software or many businesses, you need a partner. So having the right partner is really, really key. And then you really need to be passionate about the problem you're solving because, there's good days, but there's bad days, hard days. And like what gets you through is like the mission or your interest or excitement in the problem or your customers that like gets you through so many different things. So like really be passionate about something that you're solving. Otherwise, you don't want it to feel like work. You want it to feel like you're on a mission and you're like making a difference to like that mission. That will get you excited every day in the morning. I think those are the two things I'd say.
I love that. I have to remind myself sometimes, like multiple times a week, why I do this job because, like, HR is, for lack of a better way of describing it, exhausting. This job is like every day is a new hellscape reality where someone's like, figure this out. We're going to transform workplaces. You figure it out. So, but I do remind myself at the end of the day, or at least once a week, like why I do this job. And it's like, I do this job because I want to make work better for so many people. But I also want my employees to feel like they work somewhere where they are safe and are paid fairly and have a chance to succeed. And even on the hard days when I'm like really mad, I just like have to remind myself that to keep going. And I'm still here. I'm still doing it. Like, will this be me forever? I don't know. But for the time being, the reminder does really help.
Totally. Yeah. It's the fuel to keep you going every day,
Yeah. Okay. Now, one actual last question for people looking to get compensation who want to fix the compensation at their org or start fixing it. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to fix it, I think building out your ladders, it's never too early, even when you're 20, 30 people. Doesn't mean you have to have 8 levels and build it out for every department. There is a crawl, walk, run, right? Like you can focus on a department that's bigger. Maybe in tech companies, it's engineering, and healthcare might be like pharmacists. So you don't have to go from 0 to 100. Like there is an iterative way to do it. And I think it's usually good to be transparent with your organization that like with software, we're going to iterate and get this right, but we are putting a stake in the ground to figure this out. It won't be perfect from day one. That gives you the right to iterate and make mistakes, but people should start that early. Of course, we're happy to chat about it as well at Candor IQ. There's no right size or scale. Like you should do it as early as possible.
Love that. I mean, that was my first project at Work Week. Okay. For people who want to get in touch with you, this has now become a recurring bit on this podcast where I ask this question and everyone has the exact same answer. For people who want to get in touch with you, how should they reach out to you?
I mean, we have a website, www.candoriq.com, of course. It's always active and being updated. We have a LinkedIn. People can reach out to me as well. I love this space. I love talking to people. So Ikram, HIKRAM at candoriq.com, or find me on LinkedIn or contact at Candor IQ. You were mentioning Transform. We're going to be on the road a lot come March. We'll be at Transform. We'll be at Unleashed. We're going to be at World at Work if it's in April. So
Where's
please
that
reach
one?
out.
In New York?
That one is in San Antonio this year. So we'll be in Texas. So we're doing World at Work, comp and benefit stuff. Yeah, lots of different places. And we met in DC. We're all on the road a good amount too. So happy to meet people where they are sometimes.
Are you coming back anytime soon?
Yeah, we should definitely talk and explore about that. Haven't put that on the calendar, but my goal is to be in DC at least once a year.
It's about to be like the hell season where it's like so hot and it turns into a swamp and then you like don't want to leave because everything is like wet and gross outside. So the sooner you get here, the better. Because anytime after May, I'm like, I'm good until October. Catch me outside
Okay,
again.
good to know. That's a pro tip. Okay.
But it gets so swampy. And then the tourists all come out for the cherry blossoms, which in all the years I lived in DC, I think I saw once. And I was like, never again. I can look up what a cherry blossom looks like on the internet. It's like too much to see it in person. Big thank you for spending an hour with me today, talking about your founder journey and all the great compensation stuff and giving me the opportunity to geek out with you on all things compensation because I love this topic so much. You definitely should come back to the pod. I think I say this at the end of every episode, but I feel like we would have a good time talking about a bunch of things.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. So first, thank you for having me and asking me all the hard questions. I honestly enjoyed it. If we can be helpful to anyone, people who want to found a company or thinking of a comp and headcount, I'm really genuinely I love this space. So happy to talk to people.
Same. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.